Hello. As I feared, Tehran is not here. He's done this to me quite a few times already, so I guess I'm not too bothered about it, and I can go through this topic all by myself with this document about called Islamogram, Salafism and alt-right online subcultures. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is really about demonising anyone who's alt-right and socially conservative and doesn't quite agree with wokeism and feminism and globo homo, and they're going to use this kind of pre-label to identify the potential opponents of wokeism and matriarchy and intersectionality. And demonise us that way. So currently they're saying it's Muslims who are mean about liberal Muslims who who are too soft on LGBT and all the other things that the Quran actually forbids. I mean, let's face it, most Christians haven't read the Bible, most Muslims haven't read the Quran. They'll be too lazy to read it for themselves because most people don't like reading. So what will happen is that they'll be prepared to be told what it says by people that they think are okay to trust. So their local imam will just not mention that, there are verses in the Quran that says this and that goes against the liberal order. So it's not mentioned, that unmarried parents would be treated as sex offenders. It's a sort of thing that people who are capable of joined up thinking would instantly recognise should happen. But people who don't just won't notice, they won't think anything of it because maybe they're not the questioning type. Maybe they know how to shut off bits of their brain so that they won't be asking anybody inconvenient questions. So, and I know a lot of people are like that, they have a brain, they are capable of asking themselves if X, Y, Z, if you're supposed to be against something, then why are you allowing it? And all kinds of manifestations of cognitive dissonance, which unfortunately people don't really notice because they've probably been trained not to notice these things. They know that if you ask questions that is not liked, then you'll be badly treated, cancelled and demonised. So this book, this leaflet, which is about 39 pages long, I haven't read it in full. I suppose I should have done, but I guess I can read out to you the chapter headings. So it goes like this. Islamogram, Salafism and alt-right online subcultures. So, it's all internet anyway. And people post all kinds of shit on the internet and they don't really mean it and they retweet it and they don't really know. And that's what they do, but obviously these people are just being told to regard any verbal manifestation of dissent from the current order as potentially terroristic, right? I mean, this is what these academics are hired to do. So, they'll say, they'll call any tweet that they don't like a terror incident or something like that, right? You know, and so it's all in their minds, and they want to big it up and, make what is in fact subjective, the case. So here is the executive summary, which says, in the 2 decades since the 9/11 attacks, online Salafi activism has fundamentally changed, shaped by a generational shift involving younger followers. But of course, the ubiquity of video game devices and platforms and the rise of message boards, social media platforms, and encrypted messaging applications, this new strain of Salafi activism is borrowing and adapting the visual language of gaming, the alt-right and the far-right. So, they're going to merge these two groups to make them seem doubly dangerous. When really, these are just sort of people talking and making memes, and if people are just making memes, they're just not up to anything. I mean, making memes is a kind of displacement activity. They can't do anything, so they just make jokes about it, and they consider, a retweet as some kind of moral validation, and that's it. This kind of non-activity is going to keep all these sort of anonymous avatars happy, I guess. So what they're terrified of is the alt-right and Islam merging and becoming some sort of a movement that, well, will become unstoppable because of its moral and intellectual authority and coherence. But right now it's just sort of, kids memeing with, that frog thing, right? Pepe. I mean, anybody who uses this ridiculous frog is, I just don't see how they can be famous. Serious. But obviously the conscious Generation Z are increasingly alienated, and they're going to be using platforms such as 4chan, Reddit, and Discord. And these young Salafis are engaging in a self-declared meme war with progressive and liberal Muslims. Oh dear, isn't that terrible? At the same time, they promote a set of culture war tropes also used by the alt-right that attack the inherent degeneracy of Western culture. In that sense, a subset of online Salafis represent a convergence of internet subcultures that cut across platforms and is beginning to alter the shape of Salafi activism online. I mean, Salafi activism, they make it sound like there's some sort of head Salafi and he's a terrorist. It's like, well, Salafi is just, a way of interpreting the Quran in a hardline, socially conservative way. I'll look it up, just to be sure. Salafi movement, also called the Salafist movement, is a reform branch movement within Sunni Islam. The name derives from advocating a return to the traditions of the pious predecessors, the first 3 generations of Muslims that are believed to exemplify the pure form of Islam. Well, it's just a school of Sharia. It's an interpretation, obviously a hardline interpretation of, well, what it's obviously against the current degeneracy of the matriarchy. And obviously, if you're going to be demonizing any branch, any school of Sharia, this would be the one to choose. So Salafis are... So Salafi Dawah is a methodology, but it is not a madhab in fiqh. It's not a jurisprudence, as is commonly misunderstood. Salafis can come from the Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali, Hanafi, or Zahirite law schools of Sunni. In theology, Salafis are highly influenced by Hanbali doctrines. The followers of Salafi school identify themselves well, anyway, it's socially conservative, and is designed to obtain the social conservatism that obviously these people feel is the correct way to be, and obviously Salafism is the most anti-feminist way of being, and that's why it is now being demonized. So it's just talking about memes, Chan culture relies on the production of memes, famously defined and described as a cultural genetic process by Richard Dawkins. Oh yes, and I was listening to the video earlier. Guess who they mentioned? They mentioned Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson. Poor guy, he must be terrified. Using his name. Linked to... Let me just see if I can find it on this document. No, it's not, but it is in the video. I see. I don't know where Tehran is. So, he often just says, "Oh, I'll be ready," and then he's just nowhere to be found. I'm not even gonna expect him to come anymore. I mean, he's done this to me loads of times. So this is part of the course. I can do it by myself. If he's not going to turn up. But I thank him for giving me the idea. So yes, so this is a matriarchy getting concerned about memers for Islam and a more socially conservative kind of Islam. And they're going to be saying, look out for these people, they may be terrorists if you see a few memes. Why would you write a paper on this subject if not to pre-label and pre-demonize these people? Have they committed any crimes? Not yet. But, they're going to... I mean, that's the kind of implication. It's like, yeah, we've got to watch out for them because they are young and they're male and they don't agree with globo homo. So Salafis do not present themselves as Salafis, and in fact prefer to be known as either Salaf al-Saleh, righteous predecessors, followers of the Sunnah and community, or simply Muslims. Yeah, people can call themselves all kinds of things, but, we're meant to be suspicious of them, whatever they call themselves. So they bring in, lots of names of... Yeah, the gunning for liberal Muslims. Shock horror. Oh, not even, in that way that I was suggesting, but really just sort of, on Twitter, on online, they might, insult each other a bit, but, this is something that's going to be treated as a potential terrorist incident. So they're already, creating setting up the boxing ring. So I guess, anyone who talks about the moral degeneracy of the West will be identified as potential terrorists or something. And really, they're the stage of thing, prime targets for Salafi meme production. It's like, so what? These are people who meme. And what is memeing but just sort of sending stupid pictures of, troll and just stupid pictures. And then, with a kind of Islamic icing. And that's like how they're going to treat that as some potential terrorist incident. Well, Tehran was the one who suggested this, okay? It wasn't me. And he hasn't turned up. And he's done that quite a few times, so, it's not a big deal. Concepts and theories on convergence that view the ideological interplay between far-right and Islamist ideological principles in solely binary terms are seriously flawed. What does that even mean? Gen Z Salafis online communities exhibit a great deal of ideological innovation, adopting an extensive toolkit of cultural reference points to propagate their overarching worldview. These teenagers have an overarching worldview, do they? This includes the use of music, which has typically been rejected by Salafis of all stripes. Yeah, so they use a bit of music, a few GIFs, a few... And that's... I think they're kind of glamorizing it already. So this whole thing might be an own goal. It's like, people didn't even think in those terms, but, now that you've glamorized it, people will, we're online Salafists. So it's basically, alt-right preoccupations, the people who don't like Jews, and then using Islam as a way of fighting it, fighting the poles of liberalism. And this is what, I guess, really triggers these liberals of the matriarchy. And it's talking about Telegram, saying what a terrible place it is because, well, they used to be on Facebook until Facebook kicked them off, and now they've gone to Telegram. But these academic concern creators are telling us to worry about these places. But don't you think they're making work for themselves? Ideally, you just want them all to be on the same platform. I mean, if you want to spy on them, you want them to be on the same platform. You don't want to have to keep, going to Gab and Reddit and Discord. You just want them all in the same place, saying things in the quickest way possible. So, Facebook is, I know it's just more literate because it allows you to type stuff. Well, Instagram is terrible. It's like, how can you write your message? It's all just stupid pictures and you can't really, say much. And if you post, comments are very hard to find. But, Instagram is really just for people who want to post pictures of their, perfect, glamorous lives. So Facebook is still my, preferred place, if only it weren't so censorious. It really is the most literate social media platform. Do you still want me to talk about that? Yes, I see Ralph knows all about this, and well, there we go. Well, that's the next thing, because it's only a matter of time before social conservatives come to accept that the only way to fight the pos is to fight it with the best available guide to humanity. Are you in a Telegram group, Diana? Do you want to come on? I don't really want to be reading all this. Yeah, it's just when they say, oh, look at these memes, aren't they so terrible? And look at who they're on Discord, and here are screenshots of people, saying things that might be considered to be a bit nefarious. But it's really a storm in a teacup. Yeah, 4chan is so pathetic. Church of Entropy loves it, but I just look at it. I can't even look at 4chan without feeling ill. And then it says Discord servers are heavily guarded by members who are alert to Fed posting and enforce even more strict rules with regard to support for terrorist groups. So there you are, that's not enough. People are behaving and they don't encourage terrorism on their Discord server, but no, this is actually, a bad sign. Fed posting. Has anybody been accused of Fed posting? I bet you all have in your own little way. So they talk about video games. I'm bored already. So maybe Diane will join me again, or somebody else will. I don't really want to be talking about this. Well, I hope, Diana, when you do decide to log back into Telegram, you can join my Telegram group, which is... I'll find it for you. Oh, how nice. I've got a few more subscribers now. Thank you all for coming. Ah, how nice. But I don't think what any of them is yet Diana. Right. I guess I'll put my headphones on in case Diana doesn't want to rejoin us. Yeah, you get a new term, LARPing. It's being used. Much of the Salafi jihadist content posted by members was dubbed either Fed posting or suspect, or deleted by the server moderators. Some were simply considered LARPing, a term derived from live-action role-playing, but meaning an internet-based persona in this context. This means fantasy, role-playing. Perhaps they're just describing some kind of mental illness. So there's a kind of 22 Telegram channels researchers found to be linked to Islamogrammers. So if all those sort of spies now looking at our Telegram group, I don't mind. I don't post anything particularly exciting, do I? I think they just think it's terrible that some people don't like, the alphabet people. So lots of posters and red pill and blue pill stuff. And they've got a new terminology called haram posters and halal posters. But really, if you want Sharia in the West, we just have to ask nicely, I think. That's what I plan to do. I'm just going to ask them nicely and say, why can't we have that if enough people want it? And even if people don't want it, it'd still be good for us. And if they don't want it right now, perhaps they will later, and they can be made to like it. Facebook alt Salafi jihadists. Okay, this one. Much like the fringe set of alt Salafi jihadists on Telegram linked to the Salafi jihadist Islamogrammers, a community of English and Arabic alt Salafi jihadists have created 10 public and private pages and groups on Facebook. Oh dear, shocking. It must be the sign of things to come. These function as content hubs for alt Salafi jihadists trolling, how dangerous, meme production, how terrible, and subculture development. It's nothing. This community of pages and groups has a collective follower base of 20,131. This subset of the alt Salafi jihadist landscape has developed its own distinct subculture with its own set of influencers who create and curate communities on their respective platforms in a similar way to Islamogram. What on earth? And personality-driven identity. Of course it would be based on personality. And apparently they use a few swastikas and everybody gets nervous. Well, I wonder how much this person got paid for this paper. He's really puffing it out a bit, talking about visual language and digital spaces and pretentious terms, incubates new Salafi subcultures like, there were viruses actually capable of doing harm. Narratives of Islamogram. At the heart of these narratives is a disdain for liberalism, in particular liberal democracy, secularism, feminism, multiculturalism, Zionism, and liberal tendencies within Islam. Well, isn't it interesting that, you can have one Islam and so many interpretations of it that people will be fighting over in the centuries to come. And so, understandably, these people are going to be a little rude about liberal Muslims. Shock horror. Yeah, and a few jokes. Some mention of Charlie Hebdo. A beheaded Family Guy. It's quite funny, actually. And then anti-Semitism. And something called the Chad Liban. Yeah, they just make up new names and then they treat it as if it were real and pat themselves on the back about how clever they are. Chad Liban. Finally, owning the narrative. That's the last heading. A generational shift inspired by other internet subcultures using platforms like Discord, Reddit and 4chan has become one of the defining aspects of Gen Z Salafi aesthetics online. Aesthetics? Who cares about aesthetics? These internet subcultures of 4chan, Reddit and other alt-right forums are increasingly being appropriated by Gen Z Salafi members of Islamogram and the right, as well as younger supporters of the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda and Islamist movements such as the Taliban. Really? What does right mean? Haram posters intersect with a small but much more obnoxious group of young Salafis known as the right, a play on the words Aki, brother, and alt-right. The name denotes a specific subset of Haram posters, young Salafis who use elements borrowed from white supremacists in their posts. Right posters are known for appropriating alt-right language to describe themselves, such as traditionalist pan-European and are supporters of white Sharia. They consciously reject a liberal multicultural version of Islam. Within this idiosyncratic online space, we see reverence for hold on. Reverence for alt-right figures such as Alex Jones and Jack Posobiec, alongside... I'm not going to read it all. You get the idea. I'll just go back to the last heading. Owning the narrative. Gen Z Salafis are railing against loss of tradition and the enemies of that tradition by adopting a language of and visual culture familiar to the far-right and alt-right, Salafis are appropriating the power of exclusionary language and imagery as a means to define themselves. The divisive narratives expressed by Gen Z Salafis are often directed at the West and predominantly focus on liberal Muslims who approve of Western mores and work within Western social structures by laying claim to the language of the alt-right and the video and image aesthetic of a range of Chan subcultures. Gen Z have created their own unified online discourse for trolling and meme production. Shock horror. Using hipster jihad filters to make videos look like old videotapes, soundtracked by electronic or trap music rhythms, Gen Z Salafis' distinct aesthetics is a means to define themselves and their enemies. These enemies are primarily liberal Muslims and the LGBTQ plus community, as well as the Islamic State. By focusing on two issues, one mainly in relation to theological practice and the other a Western moray. Gen Z Salafis are able to articulate their principles based on their own Salafi worldview, in the process excommunicating others for showing any support for progressive views on Islam or gender and sexuality. Okay, and the last paragraph I guess I should read to you. By understanding the broad contours of these Gen Z Salafi communities and their reappropriation of Chan community, alt-right and far-right tropes and messaging, we have identified key narratives and animating Gen Z Salafi activism. ISD has brought an emerging digital community not defined by the rigidity of its ideology, but rather the elasticity demonstrated by its use of language and imagery from other online subcultures of hatred and division. That's it. No, I'm afraid I'm not having anybody on because Tehran has let me down again. Alright, that's me finished on the subject. Off you go to your preferred channel